Just to spend about 20 minutes talking about the process, infrared, and who we are. Obviously, feel free to bounce any questions over to me when we're finished. So a little bit about Jigsaw and what we do. We started the business just over 6 years ago, just by chance, just by buying in products really that we didn't even know what infrared was. And my dad installed them in his apartment to see what they did. He replaced storage heaters, and these things just worked. They made the building comfortable to live in. It was a different heat feeding altogether, and they were a lot prettier than the storage heaters that were ripped out. So we started the business pretty much 2 weeks after those went in, because we saw the options and the opportunities to start install these across the whole of the UK. When COVID hit, we decided to actually move into the manufacturing, because the stuff that we were buying in wasn't the best quality. It was mostly coming from China or Italy, so the quality wasn't where we wanted. So we decided that if we were going to do this business, we were going to make everything in the UK as well. And then the energy crisis has hit recently, and it's kind of pushed us probably about 2, 3, 4 years further down the line than we actually thought. And we started connecting all the other products, such as the water heating, the solar, and the battery, all as one solutions response. And what we found is people, when they think about electric heating, they automatically think about a storage heater. They think about a convection heater, these typical things that you strap to the wall and kind of they take up the whole wall space, and they smell in early winter when they come on for the first time. But in contrast, what we do is ideally hidden. The mirror on the right side is the heater for the whole bathroom space. That's probably a 1,000-watt heater there. What we have on the left is 2 ceiling tile panels that we mount between the Velux windows, again, to hide them away. They don't need to sit on the wall at all. They don't sit down low. It's not as efficient. And we found with our marketing that we actually needed to start highlighting what the heater was within the room, because people didn't even know that it was there and what it did. And as well as that, we can also do pictures and any bespoke mirror. And because we make these in the UK, these actually are produced in Liverpool or in the Midlands with the panel range. We can do any shape, any picture, any image, and we can turn these around quite quickly as well. But the benefit that we found from infrared is that the heaters actually only take about 5 minutes to start to warm up, as opposed to a normal convection heater or a radiator system. They can take 2 hours to make the room feel warm, but the infrared systems, you can feel hot around them within 5 minutes. So it's much quicker. And then one of the first questions we get is, well, what is infrared? Well, essentially, it's a safe, natural source produced by our heat mats within the panels themselves, and it's completely natural. Infrared is what actually warms us when we're outside from the sun. It's not the UV, which is the cancer-causing element of things. Infrared is from the other side of the spectrum, so it's completely safe. It's 100% energy efficient as well, so anything that we put into the mat comes out as heat, so that's what produces all the energy within the room. And the best thing about these panels is we can control them for each independent room as well. We don't need to put a general main thermostat in. We control every single space within the property, so it's more efficient to run. And what we do as a wider business is the connections between the smart water storage, the battery, the solar panels, as well as the infrared and controls. And we found very quickly that people didn't want to just buy a product. They wanted to know that the people that they were working with, i.e. us, that they were going to take care of the whole process. And this means that you don't have to buy all the products all at once. You can do pieces of the puzzle as you go through the property. So some people might start with the solar panel installations, or they might already have them. Or some people might have a room which is hard to heat, so they'll put a few panels in there to start off with. But you can keep on going back into the system and just purchasing bits as and when you need them. And the difference with us as a company is that we can manufacture pretty much anything within the general rules of what our heat mats are. So if the specific sizes like we get from the churches for the pew heaters, then we can produce that product quite quickly. And as I mentioned, the most important for us is if we were going to do this as a business, we were going to make sure that it was a made in Britain product. So as I mentioned, the mirror at the moment comes from Glasgow. Any printed pictures on the picture series of the glass, they come from Liverpool. and then we produce everything else and assemble them in the Midlands. So the aluminium is actually purchased literally 20 minutes from where I'm living. So we're trying to keep this company as green as possible as well, because what we're seeing is the government are pushing for decarbonisation, which is a positive thing. The problem is at the moment, they've not told us how we are going to do this decarbonisation. They're starting to put some green homes grants out there and grants for air source heat pumps, but essentially they're kind of leaving this to us to figure out really as the public and how we're going to do this. And we're seeing that very quickly that fuel poverty is increasing. It's around about 14% in the area that I live prior to the energy crisis. That's now going to potentially hit 50% in the next 12 months because the price rises. And the most important thing with this is we have got literally a couple of decades to make some big changes to what we do as a nation and as a planet to reduce our CO2 emissions. And we can see that the general data shows that every one of us emits around 15 tons of carbon per year. And that's just ridiculous. I mean, the energy and the heat that we're increasing the planet's temperature to is around about 1.5 degrees. And to do that would need hundreds of millions of Hiroshima nuclear bombs to do it. And that just shows the energy and the emissions that we're putting into the atmosphere every year, and how we're going to reduce that is quite significant. And heat, I think, equates to around about a third of that whole process. The government have set out a general platform of how we're going to achieve this, but really, unless we start doing things immediately, it's 2050 is ambitious. So this is where we come in. My background originally was I was a teacher and university lecturer. So the process of putting things together, putting resources together, and bringing in teams of people to devise and develop courses was where I started with. Nothing to do with renewable sources. It's always been kind of like a side passion. But I'm one of these early adopters. I drive an electric car. I have a battery in the garage running the property at the moment. It's actually running the computer I'm working on. I've got smart hot water cylinders. I've got air handling systems. So the test houses are our actual properties that we live in. So we will not put anything to market unless it's been tested by myself or someone else within the business for a number of years in some cases. But we find that the key to doing this and the key to net zero is testing these different products and seeing what works as the ideal solution. And the actual business name isn't Jigsaw, it's actually Solutions by Jigsaw, and it's all about these incremental parts we can offset to bring energy prices down and obviously reduce CO2. But that affects everyone's house, and how we are building those houses and how we are retrofitting those houses is very important. I mean, if we look at 5 and 6 on there, the renewable energy and the electric heating or hot water is actually last in the chain of what should be done. So air tightness and levels of insulation are the key point to making sure that we don't have much of an energy bill. So they should be considered first. And this is kind of where the people feel a little bit let down at the moment by the government, because we've got no general agenda to how we're going to do this. So part of Jigsaw's growth strategies, we are creating the partnerships with other businesses to produce a control system that can monitor energy use throughout each room. We're also starting to develop an AR and VR system that will give you a walkthrough through an ideal property to show you the small incremental changes that you can make into a property to reduce your energy bills. So for cottages like yours, homes like yours, we've done in the past is put insulated plasterboards on the interior. And that can substantially reduce energy and energy loss through that. Double glazed units or additional interior glazed units can again offset some energy. And there are cheaper ways of beginning to reduce your CO2 and reducing your energy bills rather than putting solar panels in. So we're looking at these incremental gains that we can make. But any builder or renovator now should be considering these steps before they start to move forward into building out the property. If we do the first 4 well, we shouldn't need much renewable energy, and we certainly shouldn't need much energy for heating at all. What we are working with is not just the infrared, it's also the water system and the battery systems. I have both of these in my property now, and as I mentioned, the battery is actually running everything in our house at the moment. And I charge everything on the old Eco 7 tariff, or the car charging tariffs that are around now. So instead of paying 35 pence, 40 pence per kilowatt, I'm actually paying only 7.5 pence. And that will power my house for the complete day. I probably won't need to use the mains electric at that expensive route. So the battery itself, yes, it will cost £4,000, but essentially that will pay for itself in less than 4 or 5 years, because my annual savings are around about £900 to £1,000 per year, because I'm using the battery instead of the peak rate. It's also greener because it's charging on the off-peak tariff, which is usually excess energy from the wind farms, which are still running. The same with the water cylinder in the property as well. I'm charging that on the off-peak as well at those lower tariffs, because there's excess energy in the grid, and it just means the water is ready for me when I wake up in the morning. With infrared, people are a little bit suspicious when we start talking about it, because they've never heard of it before. They kind of see it as this brand new product, but essentially it's been around for 100 years. I certainly remember my grandparents' bathrooms with the bar heaters above the sinks, the orange glow. That is essentially infrared. But what we're doing differently is we use a heat mat, which is non-visible light. And the difference with that over a water-based system is these will save a minimum of a third of amounts of the energy required. We can also set the systems lower. So properties are only set around about 19 degrees, and that's the same sort of comfort level as 2021 for a normal wet system. And if we think about any energy system, if we start to heat above 20 degrees, that costs you an additional 10 to 15% more on your energy bills. So people that are setting their energy, their heating to 21, 22 degrees, you could potentially be adding 20 to 30% on your energy bills every year, every month, every time you use the system. But what we wanted to design is a system that was very easy to install, whether that be a retrofit or a modern building. And we're seeing a lot of electricians and plumbers move to our equipment because we can quickly change out a whole house if we wanted to, or an apartment within usually a day, bigger properties in a couple of days. And the studies that we're doing with the universities are proving the case for this equipment. And this is why the government are starting to get interested by what we're doing, because we know we can heat rooms from as low as 14 degrees to 21 in sub 15 minutes. And it's all to do with the way that the infrared works. And one of the universities did a test for us last year. They actually put our heating system with a normal convection heater and a storage heater in the same rooms, and they set the same test parameters for the temperature to reach. And we proved that we could actually get to the higher temperatures quicker and maintain a higher temperature if we needed to, while using half the energy. So our 800 watt panel performed better than a 2000 watts convection heater, and it outperformed the leading storage heater as well, which again is twice the energy. And they're far more controllable. And this is all down to the way that the infrared works over convection. So a normal radiator system will heat the air, which causes a convection current within the room. So we have obviously the heat coming off the top of the radiator and around the room, which is slow because we have to heat the volume of the space. The difference with an infrared heater is we can wall mount or ceiling mount these, and they, like spotlights, actually use light to heat beneath them. So it's far more efficient and quicker. So you can actually feel that heat as soon as the panel comes on. So within 5 minutes, the panel is at full temperature, and you will feel that heat on you when you're around the panel. And the difference with the cost-effective nature of installing these is that, as I mentioned, we can do this in say a day, 2 days for a large property, whereas an air source heat pump might not be viable for every property due to installation, but they can take anywhere up to 6 days to fit. A 4-bedroom property for an air source heat pump might take 6 days, and it might take anything between 4 and 6 people to install that as a retrofit. So it's quite a lot of material and quite a lot of power, manpower, person power, should we say, to get that installed. And also the yearly maintenance with anything like a gas or a storage heater or an air source heat pump, they require cleaning, they require the maintenance, which costs money. Ours don't. The idea is they're kind of fit and forget. And this is the key point. So the installation, I mean, I'm a guinea pig. I'll throw these onto a wall and have a play. And I can do this now within about half an hour in our showroom if we're changing anything around. With an air source heat pump, you need to be a trained engineer, essentially, a trained plumber to install these. So they require far more plumbing capabilities, more time to, obviously, if you look at the amount of underfloor tubing that we've got there, as a retrofit, it's not very viable. And you need a plant room to put the equipment in. With ours, you just don't need that. So we had another university look at the tests, because we keep on getting told by the government that these things are going to save the planet. Well, in essence, they only last for 10 years and they need a lot of maintenance. And when that's worked out, they're actually far more expensive to run than gas and then an infrared panel system. And when we look over the 50-year lifespan of that, and then the 12-month running costs, we're on par with an air source heat pump, but we're cheaper to install. So the savings can be quite quick. If we start to shift this to the battery system and solar panels, that actually energy usage will reduce, because we can use renewable sources or cheaper electricity to power the system, kind of like what I do here. And this has a great knock-on effect, because every building has an EPC. And for those that don't know, the EPC is an important grading system that tells people how energy efficient your property is. And that's changed as of June this year. So anything electric heating is seen as being a more positive source of heating, because of our grid is getting greener. There are days this year that our properties were powered by sometimes 85% plus worth of green energy coming from solar panels, hydro, storage systems, even nuclear class as green within that system. But it shows the potential that we have within our grid to turn it much greener. In the past, mains gas was actually seen as the cheapest and greenest option, which is just crazy because it's a fossil fuel, so we're putting CO2 into the air. The government are heavily pushing the air source heat pumps because they use the electric. What they're also starting to do now is more experiments and more tests with companies like ours to actually evidence the efficiency of what we are producing, what we are using within the infrared. And this is good for people that are building or renovating properties, because it's pushing their EPCs up. So as part of the solutions part of the business, that we can go into a property and recommend a number of different materials to increase the efficiency of that building. So if we take the same building with as a retrofit, that might be a D, which is a fail. And you wouldn't be able to rent that property out anymore because you need to be a C. With a combination of materials, we can push that to a B grade. My property, for example, when I bought this 8 years ago, was registered as a C, but because the changes I've made, that should now be an upper B. And with the additions of solar panels, perhaps next year, that should make this grade A, which means I'm probably cutting a good couple of tons worth of emissions from my property just by making some simple step changes throughout the last 2-3 years. For a new build, we're working with a lot of the bigger builders, your Barratt's Homes, Persimmons, to do some tests with them. Again, because the gas system will be gone from 2025 from any new builds, they need to move to electric, but they also don't want to go too complicated. And with a combination of the same materials, we can still produce a B, possibly an A grade building, and that building will not have much of an energy bill. So it's about these connections, about these processes that we're working on. And the best thing of it, we don't have to make it look like a heater. We can completely hide this system. The mirrors in both the dentist that we did some years back and the cottage bottom right are the only heating source within these rooms. The panel top left can just be ceiling mounted to heat large spaces or small spaces. And what we have then is we calculate the requirements for each space. So we can say each room, like the room I'm in, would only need 400 watts. A bigger room like this room, that's a 1,000 watt heater. But we literally mix and match for the requirements based on the room. Because we make these in the UK, that picture image could be anything that you want on any size panel. We also do churches, scout huts, factories, manufacturing spaces, distribution, because we also have a high powered system. And this is actually the high power units that keeps our factory warm. Also helps the glue cure on the products that we put together there as well. And the costing, the panel costs can start from around about £4,000 for a 2-bed apartment. And again, it just depends on the levels of installation. It depends on how many bedrooms that there are within the property and the mix of products. Most people will go for the panels throughout. Some people mix and match the glass within the bedrooms or the bathrooms. But because the system all works from the same control system, it doesn't matter which one you choose. And this, again, is the one of the most important things about what we do. We're not looking at heating every room to 20, 21 degrees all the time. Our system allows us to actually pick and choose each room and turn it on to whatever temperature we want when we want it. The actual PIR sensor monitors the room temperature and also if anyone is in there. So if no one's in there, the system can be turned down to 14, 15 degrees just to keep it an ambience. And then when people walk into the room, system comes on, room heats up. And we can see this happening within the app as well. And you can be as involved with this as you want to. You don't have to see any of this. The system just does its thing. But because I'm a bit of a tech nerd, I can actually go in and see what is operating and how the system is working. So we can see the colder days when the temperature comes on in the room. We can see room occupancy. And we can see from this point here that the heating came on when it shouldn't have done. So that means someone overrided it in the office that it shouldn't have come on that day. So we can then go back into the system and save energy. The system is very easy to specify. So what we look at is the size of the space to be heated, the insulation of the building, because they're all different, the windows, and even where the heaters are going to be placed. So as part of the solutions offering, we look at each of these and say, well, you will need this panel in this room, and then you can choose what that looks like. It's white aluminium, it's a glass piece. But generally, we can design for any space. And just to give you a quick idea of what these look like in the actual settings. So this was a barn conversion we did a few years back. And they only decided to go with the infrared because they were highly insulating the property and renovating. So this was their starting point. And this is what they finished with in the end. So the mirrors were used downstairs and the panel systems were upstairs. But because they've got quite a lot of solar panels on their barn next door, they don't have much of an energy bill at all. And they've since bought more panels for the farmhouse that they've extended as well. And it all runs off the same system, so they can quickly go in and set whatever temperatures they require. And this is the final product. They wanted the panels on the ceiling, so it would heat the beds. So no cold beds on a winter's night, which just sounds perfect. But because of what we're offering now, we are working with a number of partners from the football clubs, to the Hereford and Worcester Fire Service. They have buildings that are left empty for days on end, which they're still heating. So we went in and now give them a direct heating system at each when the services are being used. Belfry Hotel, their heating bills were cut by over 60% because they had people turning the radiators up and the systems up when they weren't even using them or they weren't even occupied. So they can actually turn the system off or down when it's not being used. Same with the Birmingham Council. They've got 65,000 properties that they are working through at the moment, and they're trying to find energy saving methods to cut their bills down. Again, with the churches, they heat for 24, 48 hours before they have a Sunday service. We can go in and turn that down to just 2 hours before the service, so saving quite a lot of money there too. But because we offer the full service, we get really good reviews. People don't want to go to 5, 6 or 7 companies to get the whole job done. We handle the partnerships, we handle the installation, we handle the commissioning as well, just to make it easier as possible. And the key to that is just some simple steps. People email us in plans and say, well, what could you do for this? Here's my measurements. We can then do a site survey and a quotation. But as I mentioned, we handle the installations as well. But the equipment is designed to be installed by any electrician, any person, within reason. And because that, we can roll out this equipment quite quickly. But where we'll be moving to very quickly is offering energy support as well. It's not just about here's your product, but the next steps will be how can we make your property more efficient? Are you using the control systems correctly? Can you save a bit of money? And the example of this with the water system, I've just changed a few settings on mine and I've saved 100 kilowatts of heating in hot water in 1 month alone. Now that's probably the best part of £10 a month. So £120 a year just because I changed one single setting. Now we pass that knowledge on and we're looking to even remotely access systems so we can start to help people save money and save energy. Because a lot of people just leave their radiator systems onto a standard. But we need to change that. We need to mix things up a little bit. We need to give people more support on how we are renovating and installing, but also the lifelong operation of the system. So we're aiming to be as simple as possible. So if there's any questions, guys, please fire away.